Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson, and I am Courtney Anderson. I am happy, as always, that you have taken time out of your life to be part of the program today. And today we have a show that is one of our Educators Eden series. And of course, Educators Eden is a series that we've developed. We dedicate to those of us who either are educators, who aspire to be educators, or who just admire educators. The beauty of having something in your life that gives you the feeling that you mean something to the world, that you matter, is, I think we could just generically label it wonderful. Having someone who chooses to be an educator, that's to share knowledge, right? And has created an environment where they thrive, where honestly they wake up each day and they think, oh, I can't wait to get to my students. I can't wait to share my information. This is going to be fantastic. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about people who choose to be or aspire in the future to be, or just admire those of us who educate, and we do it with an excitement, with a passion, with a return on our investment, where we feel so good about ourselves, about the public that we are enriching in some minor way. I don't care if we have 3 students. We are helping in some way each of those individuals with content information or skill development, and we're helping them learn about themselves. What are they capable of? What are their what are the what are the ideas that they've had that potentially are holding them back from what their future possibilities may bring to bear. It really is exciting and rewarding for those educators who practice, who live in Educators Eden. Because ideally, what you have in those situations is you have somebody who is so enriched by their areas that they teach, right? That's why they're in those areas, because they're really interested in it. It makes them happy. They are curious. They could spend probably more time than they have in their lives just talking about learning, and enriching themselves in their areas of interest, because that's why they're chose to be educators, because it makes them happy. And then they're also somebody who gets an extra level of joy from helping other people learn about these areas, enhance their skills. This is so, it's really just wonderful. And I've shared in show notes and in other shows in the series that, one, of course, full disclosure, I'm have been very happy to work in different educational capacities throughout my career, mostly just teaching universities, mostly teaching business and legal related, sometimes human resources or criminal justice, but big broad areas are business and legal issues. And I love it. I really, really do. Um, all of the things that I teach are things that I'm just naturally really excited about and interested in. It makes me happy to read about or think about or explore the subjects. And then, of course, I get that extra little boost when I have the ability to share that knowledge with other people, with the students, with my peer educators, with administrators. Just, it's great. I had to be candid and honest about my own personal perspective on being an educator. And of course, I've also shared that I come from a family of educators. Both of my grandmothers were educators, and um, have I have a long history in my family of people who teach in all different types of areas, and who just love the whole idea of educating ourselves and sharing that knowledge with other people. And so, one of the things that we are doing in this specific show is looking at one of the aspects of being an educator's Eden is we're never bored. And sometimes when I'll talk to people who are not in Educators Eden. Maybe they're thinking in the future they might go into education. They're not sure. Maybe they had been in education and they left it, and maybe they just never quite got to Eden, or they haven't had the opportunity yet to enter into the field. And they'll say, oh, but I hear about so many challenges, and there's a lot of it's problems, and it's difficult in a lot of ways. And I'll say, yeah, that's true. But name me one field that's not like that. And I might be biased because I look at education, just like I've been looking at all the other professional areas I practice. So, practicing law, yeah, it's challenging. It's hard. There's a lot of unknowns. Your clients aren't always easy to get along with. Being a corporate trainer and consultant, same thing. It's hard. You have a ton of unknown variables. You have a very high risk of what's going to be the outcome. These things aren't easy, right? If they were, then at first everybody would do them, and secondly, I don't know that I would do something that was easy but I wasn't interested in. So in education specifically, like I said, I think one of the really great things about these types of professions where there are a lot of variables, where there are a lot of unknowns, where there's the challenge of sort of calibrating what you're doing to meet the needs of these individuals, right? So, and that's the same for me. I look at it, it's the same as a lawyer. It's the same as a consultant or corporate educator or corporate trainer. It's the same as an educator. I have to. It's not just what I think and me sort of like, here's what I would give you as advice. What it is it's a relationship with each of my individual clients or students, and trying to see what they want out of this, and then trying to see how I can work to customize my services and my skill set to the best of my ability to try to meet or exceed their needs. I mean, that's my job and how I see it. So yeah, it's never boring. I've heard a lot of people over my career make less than positive statements about all types of professional endeavors, but I have to say, is even in the education field, from pre-K all the way through doctoral programs, I've never heard anybody say it's boring, which to me is a great thing. So our specific show, of course, today is talking about, okay, it's not boring, but how do I teach the overachiever? Our show specifically today is teaching the overachiever. How do I teach the overachiever? Well, the first thing I think is in some of that sort of foundational content I just went over. Part of it is, why are you here? Not why are you here on our program, but why are you an educator? Or why do you aspire to be an educator? You must constantly ask yourself this question, and you need to have a good answer for it that makes you feel like it's the right choice in your life. If you're in education and you feel like, I don't know why I'm here. Or you say, well, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I saw an advertisement, for teaching, and there were some openings, and there was a training program. I just signed up for it. That's really probably not going to help smooth the path to being an Educator's Eden, and it's not going to make it probably as easy as it can be to teach an overachiever. Ideally, you should be in any work endeavor, whether it's paid or volunteer, because you want to at some level. I don't care why you want to. Sometimes you want to because you love the ideas and the content. Maybe you love the income. Maybe you love the location. Maybe you love the institution. Maybe you just love the job title. Maybe you love a certain demographic, and if you love working with 5-year-olds and you get to work with 5-year-olds, that makes you happy. Good. I don't care what it is that drives you, but something needs to drive you. Why are you here? That makes it very easy then to understand that within a classroom, and even if you have a classroom of, quote, advanced students, or you have a classroom of students who are in need of remedial work, you're still going to have variety. That's what makes it really interesting. It's not boring. People are endlessly fascinating to me. Even people that you initially might think, I don't think I'm going to be endlessly fascinated by them. You know what? Give it some time. You probably will be surprised. So when you go to look at teaching the overachiever, I find this to be one of the most awesome and interesting parts of the job. One definition of overachiever. The overachievers is just generically my definition for the purpose of the program is, they don't care what the minimum is. They want to go for the best, either the best that exists. They want to, or the best that they can do. They overachieve, right? So you give them a standard and say, okay, the standard is, here's what average is. Here's what the minimum passing score is. They don't care about that. They want to overachieve. They want to achieve more than whatever that minimum is, and they really want to achieve more than, some of them want to achieve the most. So they literally want to be number one. They want to be, valedictorian of whatever it is. They want to have the best, the highest grades. Some of them just want to overachieve based on what they've done, historically. Some of them are okay if they get, if they get an A grade, right? That in the United States, the A grade, 90% out of 100, 90 to 100 is usually A. It's the top letter grade typically, traditionally. Many people are overachievers, but they're okay as long as they get an A. So it could be literally a 90 and they're fine. There's some people who are overachievers, and if it's not the highest grade in the class, they're not happy. Some people are overachievers, and I've seen these types of personalities where even if you tell them that mathematically it's possible to earn a 100%, but historically it doesn't happen in your program, they'll still get frustrated and say, well, why didn't I get 100%? And then I'll redirect them back to the course materials that made it really clear. Here's what the average is that the class historically has. So, for example, in many of the graduate classes that I've taught most recently for many years through the University of Maryland, their campus university college, UMUC, historically trying to make sure that we have accurately reflected what our students are doing, and to prevent what they call grade inflation, right? Where the idea that and this could just be a myth, right? Although there's some data to support this idea that grades are inflated, that kind of for whatever reasons, whether there's pressure, whether it's, retention goals, whether it's, a lack of desire to want to put the work in to actually have the nuance of different levels of grading. There are many instances that have been documented where grades are inflated and people, you show up, you get a 100%. Okay, well, we don't do that in our program for many reasons. And so historically our average is a B as in boy, which is somewhere between 80 and 89%, which I would think would be rational and reasonable, right? In life, you don't go do something and then when a group of people that are doing something, everybody is literally the best, mathematically possible elite. That doesn't even make any sense unless, you're dealing with, the championship, the world championship, athletic team or something of that nature. But even to me, it's more like the Olympics, right? And I love when I watch like swimming, which is one of my favorite sports to do and certainly to watch. Although I've, of course, must admit, you've never seen me in the Olympics. Yeah. So, but what I'm saying is, you watch the Olympic races, right? And so, there's swimmers and they're swimming, and everybody's, elite. That's why they're there. But you win, and you win by, a tenth of a second, or these seem like really small numbers, or track and field. It's like, wow, they were all really fast, but that one was like slightly faster. Well, yeah, that's the whole point. There's got to be a way to distinguish. Even though they're all great, that's why they're at this world elite sporting event. But there's going to be a measurement. Somebody was the fastest, or and that matters. I think if you're trying to do measurement and you're trying to encourage people to strive to do more, right? If everybody in the Olympics who hey, you guys are all fast, we're not going to really count who ran across the finish line first and who was last. Everybody was great. You all get the same. It totally takes away the whole motive to even compete. Why even bother? Seriously? So, and we have other programs addressing these issues in more depth, but that's all to say this. The overachiever to me is a healthy and a great part of education. They just have different levels of overachieving. Some of them, I don't care what you tell them, I've had this happen in my career, you have to reinforce it. Explaining you're not going to earn 100% because no one earns 100%. It's possible, but here are the criteria that you would need to satisfy to earn 100%. And let's talk about why your grade was what it was, right? Some people, again, are happy with whatever the certain letter grade is. Some people are never happy. And this is the thing that I think is really important as an educator. Again, we have our own body of knowledge, our own excitement, passion, and skills, but that's just half the equation. The other half of the equation is start working with our students, and they all have their own unique perspective. And some educators might say, oh, it's so much work to get to learn, what drives all these different students. And I would argue, but that's the interesting part. That's what separates us from some sort of automated, computer program. right? You can go take a computer program and practice, any skill pretty much. Your writing skills, your mathematical skills. Um, you could even go through and do a lot of the analysis that I teach, and a lot of the legal issues, at least definitely the vocabulary terms and things of this nature. What makes us educators? It's the relationship. It's the part of it is the customization and fine tuning, and it's that interplay between your experience, your knowledge base, and the student's knowledge base and experience, and their own expectations. So I do a couple of things with my overachievers. One, I recognize that they're usually self-identify very early in a course. I teach university, so we have our terms. Usually when the semester starts, the term starts, I already know who probably my super duper overachievers are, because they've already self-identified, because they usually reach out to me way before the class starts. And they do a couple of things. Usually they'll reach out to me before the class, before the first day of class, and they'll introduce themselves, and they'll have questions for me. Sometimes they'll have questions for me about policies just to make sure they understand. I teach only graduate students, and many of the students I teach, in fact, have prerequisite other graduate degrees to get into my classes. So they have a lot of education and experience. Many times when they'll send these communications prior to the program starting, it's to introduce themselves and also to let me know something that is of concern to them. Maybe a policy about certain types of assignments or assessments that happen in other programs or courses, and they're just going to ask me questions and clarify. Often my overachievers will self-identify because they have a lot of questions. Now, some people who are not educators, out of passion, love for education, and the excitement of it, will bemoan this and say, oh, the overachiever, oh my gosh, the questions never end. There's so many questions. They want so much reassurance. I personally don't understand that perspective. Yeah, they want a lot of assurance. Yes, they have a lot of questions. They're overachievers. They have their own standards that have nothing to do with the syllabus, that have nothing to do with whatever the historical averages of the class. That's not what drives them. It's internal. So yes, I like their questions for a couple of reasons. One, I like that they self-identify because it gives me knowledge going into the class of the students that I might need to give extra attention to, right? It also lets me know how they process information. They're concerned about being excellent. And usually that's a two-prong assessment. It's part of it is whatever the grades are, but the other part of it is in their own drive to be excellent. And often, because I work with adults and many times very successful career professionals who already have very high responsibilities and credentials and experience for their leaders, they want to make sure that they're going to get the most out of this experience. And again, this is what separates the us educators from technology that's there to support us. What we do as educators is we're listening and taking in all that information. So when my overachievers are self-identifying early in the course, before the course starts, or at the very beginning, asking good questions, it's letting me know what's important to them. I also am able to read a lot of things into any communication. Now, I teach at this point for university. I teach online. My students are all over the world, and I love it. But when I taught traditional classroom, it's the same thing. My overachievers many times would come by my office before the semester started, made sure they had the correct course materials, made sure they understood what the class was about. And it doesn't matter the modality. I've done this long enough and in different settings that the behavior is the same. And again, they're showing me what's important to them. They're showing me what the return on investment that they want. And it's not just the grade. It's not just that level of mastery, but they really want to get everything they can out of me. That's why I'm here. That's what, again, separates the educator who's an educator's Eden from some sort of, again, technology that's there to support. The technology can drill students and have repetition and tests and quizzes and things. But the challenge in technology is not sharing any information, right? Because it doesn't have any. It doesn't have any experience. It doesn't have any anecdotes. It can't talk to them about experiences and challenges and the way they've applied this and how it's manifested itself in their career, because they aren't a being. They're a tool. So when you look at your overachiever, A, they should self-identify. Even if you haven't heard from them before the class starts, and especially if you're in traditional class, your overachiever sits up front. um, that's another easy way. I see even when I do my corporate education programs, which are we're releasing some online programs this year, but historically they've all been on ground traditional. I fly to their work location and do my education program there on site with employees, and I know at the beginning who the overachievers are when they walk in the classroom because they come up front and they're early or on time. They sit up front. They have eye contact. They either introduce themselves or greet me. That's an overachiever. Now, we're not talking about in this program our achievers, which are just sort of I want to do enough to get what I've set as my sort of average standard, and then our underachievers, which are totally different groups. But of course, our underachievers often are all the way in the back. They're there at the last minute or late. They are not making eye contact. They're doing everything they can to literally disappear in the room. um, so those are some clues. Now, is that a 100% universal rule? No, of course not. I've had people who sit up front and they're eager and excited, but they're not necessarily overachievers. And I have people who sit in the back and look like they're asleep in a class, but really are, very gifted and dedicated and tenacious students. But in general, these are clues. The overachievers motivated individually. My argument is that the difference between what an educator is a relationship between us and the student. That's the difference between us and, again, the technology. What we're doing is calibrating our experiences to be of value to our students. So when I have an overachiever student, um, my responsibility is to make sure they are never bored. Now, I mentioned earlier that one of the things about teaching, about education in general, that I love is that it's not boring. It's not repetitive. And I've done work. I've shared in other programs where I've worked on assembly lines and I've worked in minimum wage jobs where the job was entirely repetitive. Nothing ever changed, right? Sit on an assembly line and do this one task over and over again, or work in this retail store and stand in this one area and do this one thing. It's I love variety and I love challenge, and the thing is the relationship between us and the student, where ideally the overachiever leaves our class with a couple of things. The outcome that I want for my overachiever is that I would like ideally, and I can't control this, but I talk to them. I talk to everybody in the class, and I explain to them my intent is for everybody to meet or exceed their own individual goals. The challenge is, though, I don't know what those individual goals are. Only they do. So if an overachiever is going to be okay with the 90% out of 100, or they're going to be okay with whatever, and maybe they get okay with an 80% out of 100. Sometimes my overachievers are overachievers, but they're also in the middle of a lot of personal and external things that are taking up so much of their time that they just can't dedicate what they normally would to get the highest grade in the class, but they'll be satisfied with whatever their definition is of acceptable. What I'm trying to avoid for my overachievers and everybody else actually in class is at the end of the semester, the end of the final course grades are up, and then there's a disconnect that they didn't achieve anything near what they expected, and they don't understand why. Now it's my job to make sure that they always understand why their work was evaluated the way it was. That is my responsibility. The quality of their work that they submit is their responsibility. I make it very clear to the overachievers. I don't have anything to do with the grade. All I do is evaluate your work. Now, what I am here to do is make sure before your work is submitted that you understand what the expectations are, what the grading criteria are, what the process will be, what the intent of this assignment is. Why are we doing this? Right? There's a purpose to it. And then you have fun with it. So my job is to be transparent in explaining and what the process will be in terms of timing, in terms of everything from when I'm posting my lectures, when my materials will be available for them to access for the assigned work, what the deadlines are, what the rubric for the grading and how the calculation will be made. And again, for me, most important is why are we doing these assignments? Right? Because there's a purpose to it. If there wasn't a purpose, we wouldn't be doing it. I certainly wouldn't be here. There's a purpose to all of it. And so what I'm constantly bringing my overachievers back to is applying it in their real life. And examples. Many of our overachievers, of course, it's internal. Many of them are very, very, very tough judges of themselves. And they can get into a negative spiral where they feel like it's never good enough. That is a very unhealthy and we all know this in life, in any profession, a place for us to go. We know we want to treat ourselves with kindness and respect and not have unrealistic expectations. Now, of course, overachiever sometimes can exhibit perfectionist traits. Perfectionism, of course, very unhealthy because sustained perfection does not exist. Now, you might have fleeting perfection. You won a gold medal in the Olympics. You did have the highest grade on an assignment in class, but you're not going to have a situation where in life all the time, just everything you ever do is the highest, perfect, most ever. And when people put themselves in a mental process where they expect that and they get disappointed when it, quote, doesn't meet that, it's very unhealthy, it's unrealistic, and it can lead to very poor outcomes. With my overachievers, I look at it like this. I budget more of my time for my overachievers because I know they have more needs. One, they're going to have more questions, clarification, because they have very specific expectations. The other thing is they're going to ask follow-up questions. So whether I'm in a traditional lecture or I'm lecturing online, it doesn't matter. They're going to have a lot of follow-up questions because here's what they're doing. Again, it's not just to them about the grade. That's part of it, but they want to get more out of it. How can I apply this in my career? This is really interesting. I read something in the newspaper today that this reminded me about what we were talking about in class. They're asking these follow-up questions, which is what you want. They're applying it. They often will relate something that we talked about in class and a lecture in my material to something that's happening in their lives, and they'll ask me private in my office hours. And I love this. This is the whole purpose of this. Many times they'll come to me and talk about their bigger goals. So the class, of course, is part of most of what I do right now. In fact, all of what I do right now, it's part of a formal degree plan, part of a graduate degree. But beyond that, though, they have professional and career aspirations, and they want to talk to me about those. So I am allocating more of my time and resources for my overachiever because they are going to have more questions, they're going to have more follow-up, they're going to have more application inquiry. They're also going to be the ones more likely to seek me out for letters of recommendation, to talk to me about potential professional opportunities that they're looking to explore. That's sort of their personality. As I said a few minutes ago, my job is to make sure they're not bored. With my overachiever, I must calibrate my assignments and my feedback so that my overachiever doesn't feel like, oh, that was so easy, I'm bored. I got it done in 5 minutes. It was nothing, and I got 100%. That is, to me, the worst possible outcome because then the overachiever feels like, well, what's the point? So with the assignments, I layer different levels of content so that I know that the sort of the average grade will pick up maybe, whatever, 70%, 80% of the potential issues that are involved in an assignment. My overachiever, though, I know that they're going to be hunting for more information. They're going to be looking at the content more critically. They're going to also, the overachiever reads everything often before the class starts, which is perfect. I always add supplemental material to my program. So in class, in traditional classroom, of course, I have supplemental material, which is optional. You don't have to take part in it. And I have optional, study time and office hours. And it's the same thing in my distributed learning online classes. I have optional audio lectures. They're not required, they're not tested on it, but it's me explaining, it's me elaborating on content, it's me talking about techniques at the beginning of class for how to manage the entire semester, how to approach your readings and analysis, different tips and techniques for each assignment. When you're looking at something, how could you structure your writing? What would be the most important things for you to do in terms of your analysis? So that's there so that my sort of average student is going to say, what's required? What's on the test, right? That's sort of, what's on the test? What's on the test? I want to know what's on the test. Okay, good. I've told you. And I actually do a lot to make it really clear. This is what's bare minimum, right? And I used to actually use those words. Sometimes I still do, right? Here's what you have to do to quote pass. What's going to be on the test. My overachiever, though, already saw that and they were already finished it. Now they have actually, they processed it. They want more, right? I'm giving them more. There's supplemental information. There's supplemental access to me. I'll do everything in my power to make sure they're never bored. When I give their grading and feedback, remember, your overachiever, it's really odd to me, and I continue to work on this and explore and research this. You tend to see the students who really, in my mind, you would think when their work has deficiencies, I would think those students would be the ones that ask me the most questions, that are the most invested in asking me what's going on, how can they improve, going through the feedback and working through their assignments together. But we know as educators and educators Eden, that's not what we see. Those are the students, in fact, that the ones that I would think I would love to work with the most are the ones I don't hear from. And I can't make them come to me. In a traditional classroom, I'm standing there in front of people, but many times my students who really need help they didn't even come to class, which is fine. I don't, I'm not taking attendance, they're adults. But those students who I would really like to talk to, who I think need a lot of feedback, and they need to understand how serious maybe some deficiencies are, I don't typically, again, they don't follow up, they don't respond to my inquiries often. But my overachievers, and again, I don't care if my overachiever has all top grades, whatever the top category is, or even sometimes if they have literally the top score in the class, it doesn't stop them. That's the person who has the high grade is the one, my overachiever, that's the one who wants to talk to me. They want to go over every single aspect of the grade. They want to, and not to challenge it, not with some sort of thing like, oh, I can't believe this grade, but they really want to understand the thought process, the assessment. They want to understand the feedback that was noted on their work so that they can improve. They're serious. They're very serious about this. So I said earlier, I allocate more time because I know my overachievers they're gonna have more of an interest and a desire for information, data, and customization. So I'm ready for it. Very detailed. The other thing I really want to emphasize in our program, our overachievers again can sometimes potentially get to that mental space where they become very negative and self-destructive. I had a conversation with an overachiever in the last year or so, who was doing fantastically well, had some other challenges in their life they had overcome. It was wonderful, but they kept saying things to me like, it's never good enough. I just know I could do better. And I said, everyone can do better. My job as an educator again is it's this relationship. So we're investing in the whole student. Of course, we have the specific issue we're dealing with the class, but I want them to look at their self-image. I want them to look at their self-discipline. I want them to think about what their dreams are. I'm investing in the entire person, and so it's imperative with my overachievers that I bring them back down to a more realistic and healthy perspective. And of course, we do that as educators with our anecdotes of our own challenges in life, where we have to accept, first of all, sustained perfection does not exist, and it's not healthy. And we have to ask ourselves, are we being kind to ourselves and treating ourselves well? And with my overachievers, I'm very aware of often, not always, but often this sort of heightened sensitivity and their heightened self-criticism, which is very unhealthy. I don't support this at all. But I have to invest in them. And so part of what the feedback is not just that detailed, high-level explanation of scoring and analysis, but I also include language in there to address self-esteem, things of that nature. So I literally put language often in my feedback. You should be very proud of yourself. This was a challenging research paper, and yours was, very impressive. Now, many educators would say, well, what are you doing? You don't have to do that, especially with, graduate students and universities. There's a couple of reasons I do it. One, we talk about this in all of our programs, that so many people have so much negativity in their lives. And one of the most effective things you can do to get people's attention is give them some positive, personalized feedback. So I talk about that all the time. If we're going in a potential customer sales meeting, and I've never met the customer in person, I see the customer and I introduce myself, talking to the customer, I would give a personalized positive statement, something like, oh, that's a great color tie, or wow, I love your scarf. It sounds kind of silly, but it isn't. One, I want to invest in my customer. These are personal relationships, just like I invest in my students. I do care. If I didn't, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing it. It's interesting to me. I want to help. I want to help with the content with my students, and I want to help with this bigger picture where they don't self-defeat and self-sabotage. Many of my overachievers can get caught up in that, perfection is the enemy of the good, right? Oh, I was working on it, and I had, 70 pages, and it was like, no, it was a 4-page assignment. I need to redirect them sometimes. But a lot of what I do is as I'm candid with them, and I share with them my own experiences in, quote, failure, where I didn't manage my time well, where I was caught up too much in minutia and I didn't see big picture, and what the goal is so that they have a healthy self-image. If they don't have a healthy self-image, or at least an improved self-image by the end of my class, I feel like I've failed in some of my education duties. It's my job. It's not just the content. It's the content within the context of their entire life. How do they treat themselves is core. Much less because I'm dealing in with my MBA students. They're going to be, they are, many of them already are, or they will continue to be leaders, right? So if you have a supervisor, a manager, an executive who's self-loathing, insecure, we all know what that leads to: a disaster of an organization. So I mean, there's pragmatic reasons too. So the overachiever, let's go over, will self-identify usually early in the semester or before the semester starts. You can read often their body language or their communications to see they have a lot of questions. The overachiever obviously is attention to detail, so they're the ones who turn in a very well written, well edited work, versus sometimes our achievers and sometimes our underachievers who it looks like they didn't even bother to run it through spell check. Our overachievers tend to be very hard on themselves. They're very critical of themselves. I believe, my personal opinion, in Educators Eden, is part of our job is to help address that and blunt it and stop it. And one of the easiest ways is sharing our own experience. It didn't come easy for us. Some things did and some things didn't. And we've learned a lot of lessons. That's part of this relationship. This is what separates an educator, again, from a tool. This is why we are so valuable and important. And again, it's a two-way relationship. I'm investing in my students, and at some level, in a healthy self level, my students are also, reciprocating that. There's nothing better than a student saying, and it's my overachievers who say, well, I read all the feedback you gave. I listened to all your audio feedback. I try to have multiple modalities of my grading and feedback. We talk about that in other programs in this series. And that makes me happy. I know that many students, or some students, don't even bother to look at the feedback. They just look at the grade in the grade book, and who cares? Now, maybe I spent, 3 hours on that feedback, but that's not the issue. I need to be excellent and do my best every day to the best of my ability. And I need to invest in these relationships because I should be part of the content and skill enhancement. For the students who don't have what they need at this point, they may have deficiencies. I need to be part of making them aware of that so that they're not moving forward in programs and earning credentials and degrees that they don't actually have the skills for. But my overachievers are going to just need a little bit more time. They're going to need a little bit more clarification. I have to make sure they're not bored. So you need to layer your assignments. If it's too easy, then you're not serving your overachiever. There's nothing worse than your overachiever being bored. They shouldn't be. It should never be easy. It should be challenging. And the number one question I ask my overachievers when I'm talking with them, whether in person and physical office hours or via technology office hours, a phone or internet a chat, I ask them, are you bored? And I'm always satisfied when I believe I'm getting an authentic answer is, oh no, I'm not satisfied at all. Oh no, I'm not bored at all. Bored? No, no, no. This has been a challenging class. Good. That's what I want to hear. Now, of course, your overachiever has read everything, the optional articles. They've, given follow-up about current events. I mean, all this stuff's not even graded, but there's enough extra supplemental enrichment material that they feel like, yes, this is great. I'm applying it. I'm using it. And I'm investing in them beyond just this class. What's your career goal? If you don't have, what's your entrepreneurial goal? What's just your intellectual goal? What's your quality of life goal? What can I do? That's my job. So here we are in Educators Eden. We've been fortunate enough to choose to be part of the education system. We're fortunate enough to be in our own little blissful Eden, and we're also fortunate to have our overachievers. These are our students. I always personally feel so proud when my overachievers help me grow. They ask a question I've actually never heard before or I hadn't thought of. That's the wonder of that overachiever. And I'll look at something and think, wow, I hadn't thought of that. Brilliant. I'm learning. And remember, we're educators because we love information and knowledge. That's the first part of why we're here. The second part of why we're educators is we love sharing it. So there's nothing better than our overachievers. Now I'm going to say the same thing with our achievers, and I'm going to say the same thing with our underachievers, because all of that is part of that tapestry that enriches each experience. And I'm so grateful that you joined me. I'm so appreciative that you're an educator or an educator, aspiring educator, or someone who just admires educators. But this is such a privilege to be able to be an educator. And again, our overachievers are going to be the students who we should challenge, and at some level they do challenge us, but we need to make sure we support and help blunt those tendencies towards self-criticism and potentially even self-sabotage are very unhealthy. So I thank you again for being part of the program. I encourage you to come to CourtneyAnderson.com with any questions, concerns, feedback, and to take part in all that we have to offer. Thank you so much.